Good afternoon. I'm Ken Biberaj, and welcome to Coffee with Ken, a thought leadership series at the nexus of business and politics. In the news today, House Democrats elected Hakeem Jeffries as minority leader, and Treasury Secretary Jessica Yellen called for more crypto regulation in the aftermath of FTX. Today's topic, private equity with a purpose. We're joined by Graham Weaver, the founder of Alpine Investors. Great to see you, sir.
Ken, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I mean, it's amazing to kind of like look at your background and your history. And I mean, is it true you literally started Alpine from a dorm room?
I did. I was in business school at Stanford, and I actually started buying these little label printing companies, and I didn't have any money. I didn't have a fund. There wasn't a term back then. Now it's called a fundless sponsor, which basically means you don't have a fund. And I did a little bit of tap dance where I'd get the owner to agree to a letter of intent, and then behind the scenes go raise the money, which was almost all debt at that time. And then what little equity was required, I put that on a credit card, literally.
Wow. And that was like 20 years ago now, right?
Yeah, that was about 20 years ago. And I just sold one of those deals that I did 20 years ago in March. So it was kind of came full circle.
I mean, it's amazing. And look, I mean, we were going to dive a little bit into it, but Alpine doesn't strike me as like the same as every private equity company out there. I mean, tell us a little bit about what differentiates you guys, how you've approached this, and maybe even some of the lessons you learned before you even started it, right? I think you had a little bit of experience on Wall Street, right? I mean, how was that an eye opener for you? And just kind of a little bit on the origin.
Yeah, I came out of college and I was so excited. Got this job on Wall Street and thought it was going to be just like the movies, and in many ways it was. And but it was also just a unnecessarily awful culture. It was unnecessarily awful in that I just didn't really learn that much. I like to say we packed 2 years of learning into we packed about 2 months of learning into 2 years. We learned how to build a financial model and then basically did that for the next 2 years. And I felt like not only was it, I work in a lot of hours, but I felt like I was only really using about 3% of my capacity. And so really when I designed Alpine, it was, how do I build the job that I would have wanted when I graduated, and where I could express myself more than 3%, work with people I liked and trusted and admired. And that was really what I was trying to do when I started Alpine.
So it's almost like the exact opposite of what you experienced, right? Like, how do you
so much so, Ken, that for the first 15 years of Alpine, we never hired anyone who'd ever worked on Wall Street, worked in private equity, worked at a hedge fund, worked in investment banking. I was so petrified that I thought to myself, we can teach people private equity, but I can't teach their core values, or I don't have time to have them unlearn stuff that they learned on Wall Street.
I mean, because that goes right to the culture, right? I mean, that's one of those softer things. I mean, absolutely incredible. So you really have this people first approach, right? I mean, this is how you look at it. It hasn't really been something where you're always hiring people right out of business school who have been on Wall Street, who are kind of number crunchers, right? I mean, you're looking. What are you looking for, right? Like, how have you been doing it? If you're
Ken, I'll tell you this quick story that is just like I had this. There aren't that many moments in your life where you have this total light bulb moment, but I had this one. I hired an executive coach in the middle of the Great Recession, right in 2009, and we're having this conversation. I'm flying around the country. I'm so stressed. I'm not sleeping, and I'm thinking my business is falling apart. We're trying to save the company anyway, and so my executive coach, we go through this process where it's called like the root cause analysis. So he says, well, why? Tell me a little bit about why are you flying to Houston to fix this company? And why? And he kind of says, well, tell me about this. And then, well, what about this CEO? And he keeps asking about the CEO. And I said, well, I don't know why you're asking about the CEO, because, we're in the middle of the Great Recession. That's the problem. Haven't you, seen the news? and then he said, well, give me a rating. If you had to give me a rating of this person, how would you rate him? I said, I don't know, probably a B. And then we went to the next crisis, and the person at the root of that was like a B minus. And the next crisis was a B minus. And at the end of that, he says, Graham, you told me your goal is to build the highest returning private equity firm in the world. Are you going to do that with B minus people? And then he said, and by the way, if you're someone who's putting in all these B minus people, how would you rate yourself as a CEO? And I was like, whoa. And so I realized,
That is
yeah, it was crazy. And so I realized I'm going around putting out all these fires, but I'm not, extinguishing the problem, which is really like having world-class people in these roles. And so we just started. I mean, literally, I wrote down in my notebook, like I am in the talent business. I wrote that down, and then from then on, that's really how we've really built our company and how we've put all our resources and our energy and how we've thought about our company.
I mean, I think that's just like a point worth diving in a little bit, right? Like you think of yourself as being in the talent business, even though you're in the private equity business.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
100%.
And to that end, I mean, tell everyone, right? Like how many people you even have management coaches on staff, apparently, right? I mean, like this is something you're really like investing in.
Yeah. So I'm just a huge fan of executive coaching, and so much so, yeah, we have, I think, over 20 management coaches that are basically on retainer. And I think they've done, now to date, they've done over 500 coaching engagements with people at Alpine and our portfolio companies, and we're continuing to grow that. So, we're trying to invest, not just hire people, but also invest in their training and development as well.
And that's a little unique, right? Like, I mean, this direct training program initiative, like you're a very hands-on private equity firm, right? I mean, like is that a bit of a differentiator with you guys? You're not just cutting checks and putting them in, like you're hands-on, you're looking to train, not necessarily just take a big successful CEO from somewhere else and pop them into one of your companies, right? I mean, that in and of itself seems a little counterintuitive and different.
Yeah. So we were talking about this earlier, but I teach a class at Stanford, teach 2 classes at Stanford Business School. And for years I'd meet with students and they'd say, hey, Graham, I want to be a CEO. That's what I really want to do. And what's the path to do that? What job should I take? How do I get training? What's that path? And I really didn't ever have a good answer for them on that. So finally one year I said to one of my students, hey, why don't we hire you and you'll go into a company, we'll train you and you can become a CEO. And I couldn't get any of my companies to hire this person because they said, here's this really expensive person who's a little bit entitled, who has no experience. Like, I don't want this person. So we didn't even get that person placed. The next year, that's how kind of counterintuitive this was. The next year we had this woman and we hired her, and I told this same CEO, just hire her. I'll pay her salary after a year out of the management company if she doesn't work out. She crushed it. And the next year he said, okay, can I have 3 more? And then we were onto something. And we also, so not only were we right that the high attribute people can have a huge impact early in their careers. We were dead right on that. But we were also, I underestimated the demand from the students and how much they really wanted to be CEOs really early in their career. So that we put those 2 things together, and it's been more kind of magical than I ever would have imagined when we started.
And real results to show, right? I mean, not to get into too many number details, but like at a high level, I mean, how many companies are you guys involved with? You have pretty massive fund already, and real success year over year based on this strategy, it seems.
Yeah, it's been unbelievable. As much as I thought people would be ready for these challenges, I underestimated. I probably was in the top 1/2 of 1% of what I thought the potential of these MBAs was, and I was wildly wrong on the downside. They've been way more successful, and so yeah, I mean, last year, for example, we made 129 investments. Most of those we put a person like I just described into those companies, and so it's just really been unbelievable successful.
Wow. And I think you guys deserve some credit here, right? I think recently I was reading something you had like 60 trainees through some of these training programs, and like 72% come from underrepresented communities. I mean, so this is a very tangible, intentional effort to really diversify even the pool of people within your portfolio companies.
Yeah, if you think about how the normal recruiting process is, let's say you need a CEO of a healthcare software company. So you hire Heidrick and Struggles and you say, I want a CEO of a healthcare software company. They say, okay, great. They go look for people who've been CEOs, who have 10 years of experience, who've done that. They give you 3 candidates. 2 of them are willing to relocate. One, whatever, you don't get to come, you pick the 3rd one. For us, so what's happening is, let's say that you have a goal to have more underrepresented populations in your CEO ranks, and you have a goal to have more women or whatever it is. The problem with the normal model is that battle was won or lost 10 years ago. If you're requiring 10 years of experience for your CEO, like you're not actually changing the composition of CEOs. You're just moving chess pieces around. For us, because we're hiring people right out of school, we can give a path to underrepresented minorities or women. We can give them a clear, direct path to being CEO, which they wouldn't have otherwise. And so we feel like we really actually are increasing, the underrepresented ranks in CEO positions.
And what kind of time horizon do you have for these folks, right? Like you put them through the ringer, I think, right? I mean, this isn't, people are going to earn and they're going to learn and work through it. So maybe talk a little bit about what does it take to be brought into Alpine and eventually find your way into being in the C-suite of one of your portfolio companies. I mean, what does that journey look like for someone?
For the most common role, it's actually they're the CEO right when they graduate, which I know probably is the last thing you expected me to say, but they're often running a small add-on acquisition, and they, to be candid, they do have a learning curve. It's probably a year to 18 months until they're surpassing the equivalent person who would have come into that role who had experience. But then after that year, they're continuing to pass that person for pretty much the rest of their career. So we have to make sure that we, don't blow the thing up in the first year. And we do that with a lot of training. We have mentorship. We have some coaches we're pairing them with. So we have a lot of support, because after that year, they're really just taken off.
So the traditional way is you get a certain pool of people coming out of business school or with a certain pedigree or degree, qualification, or experience. You're literally creating your own talent pool practically, right? I mean, I think one of the differentiators worth kind of like just noting, right? Like there's a war on talent. Everyone's trying to find the best people. They're trying to incentivize, but you're kind of getting them in early enough that you can kind of help mold, shape, and give them the training they need to excel at their own level.
I think that I just think they're ready, and they're more ready than even they know. And the only way to really prove that is to have them go do it. You can talk about it, they can read about it, but they got to get in and do it. And then they realize in a short period of time, they're actually pretty good at hiring people. They can get people excited about their vision. They can, they can sell, they can get customers. I mean, they're ready. They don't, a lot of times they don't know that about themselves. Sure. But they are, and it's really, really fun to watch that transition.
Well, just to piggyback on that, right? A lot of that sounds like confidence, self-help, and it's something that you talk a lot about, right? I mean, you have really spent a lot of your career, and you see it now even as a TikTok star, and we'll get into that in a second. But just where did this come from? This obsession or desire to just understand self-help and leadership and confidence and so on for you, and how do you now use that every day for your talent and your students?
I mean, it's kind of a crazy story, but I grew up in a small town in Ohio. For most of my high school years, I lived with my mom, a single mom, and Ohio's a blue collar town that's kind of a supplier to the automotive town. So it's a union type. I was at Toledo, Ohio, so it's a union town, and not a lot of people. I'll say it, most people stay there and kind of have a pretty set path. And I started mowing lawns, and my parents had just gotten divorced, so my ground was a little shaky, and I was kind of looking for something to hold on to. I used my lawn mowing money, bought this Sony Walkman, and then I started listening to these self-help tapes like Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, or pick any one of Brian Tracy's audio tapes, and literally, like, it was like the thing that I had been lacking and looking for from these tapes. It was like I was the right student at the right time, that I wanted something to grab onto, and then I just literally, what you can imagine, 5 hours of mowing lawns and brainwashing myself with this self-help stuff about you too can set big goals and achieve them. And I started believing it and doing just what they say: write your goals out every single day in the present tense. What are the things you're going to do to work toward them? And I started doing this, when I was like 14, 15 years old, and then started watching my life quickly turn around. And so I just really believe in the power of a lot of those practices, primarily around, setting and living with intention, setting really exciting goals, figuring out what you want to do with your life, what inspires you, and starting there. And by the way, that's a lot of what executive coaches do, is really help you answer the question, what do I want? What's my nirvana? And then those are really, Ken, those are really hard questions to answer. And they can sometimes be painful because you're doing something in your life that isn't consistent with that right now. And that can be really scary. But I couldn't believe more in just that power of giving yourself that time to figure out those answers.
And I mean, this is something for your career you've kind of still embraced, right? I mean, you referenced earlier, you had a coach, an executive advisor during the recession who helped you kind of really drill down to thinking about that. You're investing at Alpine and having management consultants. I mean, this is something you didn't stop doing, it doesn't sound like, right? You continue to do this today. And I mean, it seems to be a large part of your life and what you're doing with your students and publicly, right?
Yeah, it is. It is a big part of what I'm trying to do in social media and what I'm doing at teaching. And then, the executive coaches are really facilitating that exact process of living with intention and figuring out what you want and working backwards and then holding you accountable to that path. I mean, it's not complicated stuff, but it does require a fair amount of intention and discipline. And a lot of times it's also kind of tedious too. So, so we all need the help. At least I'll speak for myself. I need the help of coaches to kind of hold me and keep me on that path.
That's amazing. So look, so you in the spring, I think, got more active on social media. Let's talk about that for a second. I think you have several 100,000 followers on TikTok. You're active on LinkedIn. Tell us about that. Like, what are you trying to communicate? Why are you doing that? To what end? And has it been gratifying and rewarding? I mean, well, what's that been like for you?
Well, as you probably know, there's, from your coffee chat,
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
No idea.
Not 95% of the people on there are excited and it's really positive. And then there's, of course, trolls and haters and that, and you have to develop a thick skin. I'm still working on the thick skin part. I still can get thrown off by some of the negative feedback, but in general, it's been really positive. But what happened is I went on to social media and I started a blog in 2020 during COVID, and that was really well received. And I'm really proud of that blog. Quick pitch, it's grahamweaver.com.
Perfect.
And so I started that, and I started just I write every day. I was writing every day anyway. And so every now and then I would send an article to someone that I wrote, and then it would go quasi viral and it would make its way back around to me. And it wasn't even intended for that. So then I started a blog, and then I realized the vast majority of people aren't even going to read a 3-page blog. So then I started cutting that into shorter videos and putting them on TikTok. And a couple of those early ones, literally my 7th video I put out went viral. And then the next 3 did. And then I started getting really positive feedback. And it was basic stuff, Ken, about how do you set a 5-year goal?
Sure.
What are some principles of investing? What are some good habits, and how can you form some good habits? Just some really basic core things like that. But what I was realizing is there was no content like that on TikTok at the time. And so I felt like I kind of went back and said, gosh, when I was 14, I had Brian Tracy and Zig Ziglar and Tony Robbins and those guys creating that content that changed my life. I'm not saying I'm going to be that person, but I'm at least going to try, So I'm gonna put out everything that I know that can be helpful to that cohort. And if there's a few people that it hits at the right time with the right message, then great. So that's why I've been so active on TikTok.
And so segue that into the teaching, right? Like, you're not an adjunct professor, doing this on the side, online, right? Like, you were actually teaching courses at Stanford, right? I mean, tell us about that, how long it went on. And
I mean, it is an absolute gift to be able to teach there. It is, it's funny. My first day, I have to call out this guy, David Dodson. So the first couple of years I was going to co-teach with David. We didn't know each other that well. David's an amazing lecturer at Stanford, and I didn't know him that well, but I was, because I was just new, we were going to split the class. So we sit down, and I said something like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to give back, or something like that, right? And David said, Graham, stop. You're not giving back. There's 100 people in line to have this job. You got to wake up every day and you got to earn this job, and you got to throw yourself into it. Like, don't give me this give back bullshit. Sorry, I shouldn't swear.
That's okay.
Sorry, he just went in and like, honestly, he was 100% right. And I was like, oh yeah, nice to meet you, David. I'm Graham. But he was 100% right. And like, I've kind of brought that energy to the class where it's like, hey, I'm really grateful to be able to have this opportunity. Yeah. So I put a ton of energy into it. It's so fun. My class has 17 or 18 guests who come to class, and we do a case on them, and then they're there and they comment on it, and the guests have a lot of fun doing that. The students have fun, and it's a ton of work.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah,
it is during the time when I'm teaching. It's nights and weekends preparing the lectures, and then of course I have a day job too. Yeah. So it's a lot.
And how long have you been doing it?
I've been doing a class that they wrote a case about all the stuff that went wrong when I was buying companies in my dorm room. I've been doing that for 20 years, and then I've been not full time, but having a full class, two full classes for 9 years.
Wow. So talk a little bit about that. Like, there was a case on some of your companies and some of your strategy. How has Alpine evolved over 20 years, right? Like, you mentioned the recession and kind of this real, come to reality moment about like the talent and CEOs. You fixed that. So now you have all this time to do teaching and TikTok, obviously, so that's been a good thing, right? So like, tell us about the journey a little bit.
I'll tell you, here's the journey at Alpine. So we start off, and I can't talk about specific fund performance, but we start off, first fund does horribly, just horribly. So I spent a year getting the fund raised. I have this dream, just like I wrote down in my journal every day, and it's a disaster. It's funny, I guess, with the benefit of hindsight, it was the best thing that ever happened to us, because we had to invest in continuous improvement and like systematize getting better. And that's where a lot of the executive coaching and also just a lot of humility came. Sure. And we're still always trying to learn and always trying to get better. So in hindsight, it was a great thing. At the time, certainly didn't feel that way. So then we started getting a little bit better, and then bam, we just got smacked by the recession, which I kind of started covering before. So we had another kind of come to Jesus moment, and that was really transformative. That was when we started spending a full day a week outside the office during the recession, working on our business, which is crazy. But so think about it, like, you're in the middle of this recession, all this stuff's going on, and you're spending a full day where you go out of the office and you're thinking about, how are we going to be great a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? And then we're going to actually start working on those projects that we're coming up with. We've kept that practice, not a full day a week, but probably 10% of our time, thinking about planting trees today that are going to bloom, years from now. And I think that was really transformative. That combined with the thing I mentioned earlier about realizing we're in the talent business. And then from there, we've just kind of been growing pretty consistently, and it's been a great ride. I mean, not always every day isn't perfect, but it's been a phenomenal journey.
So what type of companies are you looking at? What's getting you excited now? Like, the economy's a bit shaky. Clearly, it seems like a recession is either on us or coming. What do you see in the next 24 months? Where are you battening down the hatches? Are you excited? Like, what's on your mind?
That's a great question. So
it only took 24 minutes. I knew it would get there at some point. I'm
sorry, what's that?
I said it's only taking 24 minutes to get to the good question.
Yeah. No, you've had good questions throughout, Ken. Anyway, funny. Yeah, what we do in the past, we do software and services at Alpine. We try to find asset-light companies that have pretty predictable revenue. That's basically what we're looking for. In the past 24 months, we really didn't see many exciting things in the software side of that. Prices were really high, so we stayed pretty clear of the down the fairway software businesses, and that has turned out to be a good decision. Going forward, we're starting to see more interesting thing in both software and services. what happens, like there's like a flow where, okay, the public markets fall first. The next thing that happens is the debt markets. So those have kind of softened. And then the next thing is the individual founder-owned businesses. They start to lower their price expectations. And then eventually the institutional investors will. Right now, we're still at there's a pretty big bid-ask spread between what sellers want for their companies and what buyers are willing to pay. So not a lot of deals are getting done. And you'll see that normally, like there'll be like a period where volume dries up a little bit, but we're still seeing really, really interesting direct deals in software and services. So I think it's an exciting time. I think deal volume will be a little bit slower, but we're seeing really, really exciting things to invest in.
And just advice to the general public, right? I mean, I think some of your more popular TikTok segments have been related to crypto and some of this stuff. I mean, do 30 seconds on kind of, if you're just looking, if you're a normal person, you want to make some investments, like what's Graham's advice on investing, and a couple of seconds on your thoughts on crypto in general.
Okay, well, I definitely was told by compliance to say the disclaimer that I am not offering investment advice to the general public. So I got to say that. And with that caveat, my thing on crypto, Ken, is I started seeing these people on these 20-something-year-old on crypto just pitching XYZ coin, little, altcoin, non-mainstream coins, and just saying it with so much conviction, like they were just going to tell you what time it was. That's how much conviction they had. Yeah. And then a really close friend of mine lost basically her whole life savings in one of those altcoins. And so I just said, there needs to be another voice on TikTok talking the other side of this story. Yeah. The other side of the story is there's 18,000, 19,000 cryptocurrencies. And like, I can tell you right now, the vast, vast majority of those are going to be worth zero. And all you have to do is look back at the 1900s. There were 3,000 car companies. 2,997 of them went to zero. 4 GM and Chrysler survived. There were 3,000 .com companies in 1998, 99. Amazon made it. Google made it. eBay made it. That's about it from that cohort. The other 2,999 went to zero. We're in the same thing. And so I just felt like there needed to be a counter argument. I started putting out those videos, and my timing was pretty good because it was about when crypto peaked that I started offering that message. But the message is true no matter where the price of crypto is, which is you just have no idea. And so don't invest your life savings in something that you just can't predict. That would be my advice. It'd be like going to, Vegas and putting your life savings on number 17 on the roulette wheel. Like, yeah, it's going to work sometimes, but it's probably a good bet for like $100. It's not a good bet for your life savings,
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. That's incredible. And last, before we wrap up, I mean, you're sitting in the office, it's been a pretty tumultuous couple of years with the pandemic. How do you think about return to the office, being in person, building teams, building culture? I mean, there's so much tied to what you're doing and what you've talked about already. I mean, you're so hands-on. So how do you think about this stuff?
I mean, we have 3 goals at Alpine. Number 1, be the highest returning private equity firm in the world. Number 2, be the place where the best people want to work. And number 3, be a force for good. Those are our 3 goals. Number 2, be a place where the best people want to work. For us, that does involve, physical office space. We're actually expanding our space here. Our headquarters are in San Francisco. We're opening a New York office this summer, which is going to be a pretty large office. We opened an office in Salt Lake City. We're going to be expanding here in San Francisco. We're probably going to open another office. I mean, our median age at Alpine is like 25. So people want the opportunity to be together, and yes, it's expensive. And to be honest, like people are probably in on average 3 days a week. So are we overpaying for the capacity? Probably, but that's a rounding error compared to getting the best people in the world who are excited about coming to work, who have a space they like. And so, we're huge fans of the physical space and giving people the flexibility to work from home 2 days a week too.
Perfect. Well, look, Graham Weaver, thanks so much for coming on. Congrats on all the amazing success. Appreciate everyone listening in. And, Graham's background in Ohio. We're going back to Ohio on December 14th. We're interviewing Justin Bibb, the mayor of Cleveland. We call him the millennial mayor. Until then, you can follow us on coffeewithken.com and listen to us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Google Play. Graham, great seeing you. Keep in touch.
Ken, thanks so much. Had a blast. Thanks for all the great questions were great. So thank you.
Well, Professor, we'll see you soon. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.